EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Another big breaking news reaction edition after another signing came down yesterday, and that was Zack Baun. We'll tell you more about that on the show today. Johnny Mac, how you doing this Thursday morning, brother?
Doing well. Happy Zack Baun Day, everybody. That was the priority. The priority is in the bag, so you don't have to worry about that one anymore.
Pretty crazy, though, John. A linebacker getting big money from the Philadelphia Eagles. Some thought we would never see the day. And Howie Roseman, again, just doesn't allow himself to be put into a box. He liked the player, obviously. He felt like this guy was different, and he obviously was different all year long. But your thoughts, man? How got the deal done? Big money for a linebacker in Philly for maybe the first time since you started covering this football team. And I got to say, it feels good as an Eagles fan, but I think it's the right move for this team moving forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to give Howie his flowers on that part of it. I know a lot of people are, but, this guy played on the field. You couldn't deny it. And you talk about not paying a linebacker for all that time, not drafting a linebacker in the first round since Jerry Robinson, yada, yada, yada. In a lot of ways, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that you never got a player like this at that particular position.
Right.
And then, everybody's talked about it from Howie to Zack Baun himself. This wasn't supposed to be that player. 1 year, $3.5 million, and he just hit. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Now, after watching that season, you couldn't double down and say, oh, we're going to play Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Then, it would have been, that's where Howie is good at. And, he's a good player. It doesn't matter the position. The philosophy is, if you have good players, pay good players and in the prime of their career. And that's where Zack Baun is. But I know a lot of people are going to focus on him finally paying a linebacker, him finally paying a running back. And where he deserves credit is not falling into, oh, Miles Sanders made the Pro Bowl. Oh, right. The DeAndre Swift made the Pro Bowl. TJ Edwards had a great season. You don't pay those guys like stars because they're not stars. And they got to start running back and they got to start linebacker, and they paid him. For that, he deserves credit for it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Good player evaluation from Howie's perspective. John, one of the things I love that you do here is you elevate the conversation as a phrase that you always use, but explain to people how this contract works. I know it hasn't been filed yet, but, everybody sees 3 years, and I see it all over the place. And it is a 3-year deal. It's great for him. But explain how Howie works the contracts, because I think this is one of the reasons he's able to do things like this so consistently. It's a 3-year deal, $51 million. I think it was $34 million guaranteed. At least that's what it was reported. Probably an agent-driven number. We'll see what the final number is, but I'm sure it's going to be 2 years. I'm sure Howie's going to have an out after 2 years, and you'll be able to reevaluate. But shed a little light on that for the people.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail. If it's 3 years, it's basically going to be essentially 2 years, and then we'll readdress it at that particular time. You saw it even earlier with Saquon Barkley earlier this week. He signed a 3-year deal. It was really 2 years, and we'll address it at that point. Now, Saquon performed at such a high level that they decided to go even earlier. But that's the framework, and that's why I always talk about people talking about the next 10 years. The next 10 years, I don't care about the next 10 years. It's the next 3 years. That's it, basically. And, it's about flexibility. And Jeffrey Lurie, as I often bring up, is a big part of this as well, because the philosophy that the Eagles use that others don't follow, at least a lot of others, is spending cash over cap, essentially. Cash up front, spread out the cap over many years, voidable years, so you can bring in as many good players in the window that they're in now, which is a championship window. Now, sometimes they're not in that window and they go about it a little bit different, and they have to go about it a little bit different, but they're in that window. So it's basically about spending cash now and putting it on the credit card, for lack of a better term. And there's all these voidable years on the back end that can come into it. You'll see it. You've already seen it with Slay and Bradbury. It accelerates that dead money onto the second year when they split it up. So there's some risk involved, but they've been very good at evaluating players, and that's number one, spending the cash. And you have to have an owner ready to do that and willing to do it, and having the financial heft to do it. And the Eagles do with Jeffrey Lurie. They seize early. That's, again, Saquon. I mean, nobody was thinking about Saquon. I wasn't thinking about Saquon. Nobody in the league is thinking about Saquon. Everybody else who had Saquon, if they had Saquon and they had that same year, which is not possible. It's not a vacuum. You're not going to have the same offensive line. We all know that. But the point is, everybody else would say, oh, we don't have to worry about Saquon until next year.
Right.
Everybody. And I'm saying 31 out of 32. They just don't think that way. And that's where the Eagles have this huge advantage. So instead of waiting and until next year, and who knows where the market is, but I do know the cap's going to be up $40 million by that point. So everything gets more expensive. So they're proactive to sign good players earlier than later. That's part of it. And they're creative. I mean, they're creative when it comes to creating cap space, which is one of the things that is tremendously over. You see the Dallas Cowboys. Nobody handles the cap worse than the Dallas Cowboys. Well, they created $50 million in space or whatever.
Right.
Like, everybody's so worried about space. Don't worry about it. It's very malleable. As long as you have an owner willing to take risk and willing to kick the can down the road, pay that cash now, which the Eagles do, it's a huge advantage. So that's part of it. And then obviously the biggest part of it all is player evaluation, drafting, signing good players, and nobody's going to hit 100%. Think of it as a baseball batting average. Maybe you have to be a little bit better than that, but you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong. Whether it's draft picks, whether it's free agent signings. You've seen it in the past with all the players you dislike, the Philadelphia fans dislike, the Ragers, the Barnetts, the Dillards. It's not an exact science. You're dealing with human beings. Bryce Huff, they gave Bryce Huff the same contract they gave Zach Bond last year, which tells you the edge rusher market versus the off-ball linebacker market. But you're not going to hit on everything, but the Eagles are very good when it comes, and have been very good, especially over the past 3 or 4 years when it comes to evaluating players.
John, what's this mean for the makeup of the defense for next year? It already seems to be coming together. Obviously, still some work to do. Obviously, have the draft in front of us, and Howie, in one of his first offseason comments, said, it's not over at free agency. It's not over at the draft. It's not over until really the trade deadline next year. But this thing's already shaping up pretty good this offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles. I kind of viewed this also as, maybe a deal for Vic Fangio, right? You gave him a bunch of bottom of the barrel guys last year. Oh, let's be real. Zach Bond was not supposed to be this. And he delivered you. He took those ingredients and delivered you the best defense we've had maybe ever in Philly, the number one overall defense in the NFL. Here you go. Vic, here's your linebacker back on a big deal. I view it like that. How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, to this point, it's like when we're talking about Miles the other week, I said the human mind's an interesting thing. I'm like, nothing has happened that wasn't supposed to happen. Saquon wasn't going anywhere. Saquon was under contract.
Right.
He was going to be part of this team. Zach Bond, we tried to hand as much as we could, was the top priority of the team. He wasn't going anywhere. This is all part of the plan. Nothing has happened that wasn't supposed to happen. Now, if they sign Milton Williams if they sign Mekhi Becton. We'll see what happens with Slay. That was part of the plan, but can they get him back? Like, nothing to this point that has happened has been made this team, certainly better than they were last year as the Super Bowl champion.
But the plan
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do, and these were not two of the tougher. You didn't even have to address Saquon; they just did. With Zach, obviously, you had to address him, but that was the number one, and he wanted to be here. They wanted him here. They're bare. I couldn't envision a way where Zach Bond wasn't going to be here, because why is he going to, if he can make 19 million somewhere else with, I don't know, the New England Patriots? If you're Zach Bond and you just went through what you went through in New Orleans and you're going to go to one of the worst teams in football, you're going to be cut in 2 years and you're going to have a nice chunk of change in the bank. But he's got a nice chunk of change in the bank with a really good team. So I never felt that they were in danger of losing Zach Bond. Now everybody else, look, I think they can get Becton done. I think they can get Isaiah Rodgers done. Those guys, I still think Milton's going to be really difficult. I still think Josh Sweat's going to be really difficult. So the human mind's an interesting thing. But
well, I mean, John, you know this. The plan doesn't always go, man. The plan isn't. That's why Howie's so good at his contingency plans. And I think it was.
Yeah, but we haven't hit the contingency.
I know.
When we hit the contingency, I'll let you know.
I know that, but I'm just saying, because it doesn't always hit, it felt. I think it was fair for people to wonder, will this team pay a linebacker, or better yet, will a dumbass team give him $22 million and it would be too hard for him to turn down? I think that was always a possibility. So until this deal got done, I think people had their reservations, obviously.
Well, yeah, and that's why it wasn't only me. I'm not trying. It was everybody else. I mean, you could see across whoever you like to follow, they were all saying the same thing. They were all saying the same thing for a reason. I said a couple times on this show, I don't think he's getting a free agency. Now, you always leave the door open, little 5%, because, of the player and there are a lot of players that are going to go for every quarter and every dime they can get, but I never got the feeling that Zach was one of them. I always put him in that category, with Mekhi's in that category as well. Isaiah's in that category as well, who's got a lot of loyalty to the Eagles and the opportunity that he gave them. In the building, he was chanting "Go Eagles, go" wherever he was. In the building, there was no concern over losing Zach Bond. This was always the top priority, and it happened the way everybody thought it was going to happen.
Well, I think it's still a credit to them for getting the deal done, for Zach coming back, and for Howie just I think he has just a good pulse, man. I know you're saying this is no contingencies, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to give him credit for getting it done. I think every championship team has core players. Every team has core players. We had one of those core players that was up to leave potentially, and Howie is now, like I said, there's a lot to do still. But now you're filling in the blanks, and you feel much better about the core of both your offense and defense returning for the next season. I think that's a good thing.
Well, that's where we differ a little bit. Like, you're not filling in anything. These were filled in. Like, these were in pen.
No, I mean around these guys now, filling in, like in the draft.
The other stuff is, how do you fill in if you lose Milton Williams? How do you fill in if you lose Josh Sweat? How do you fill in if you lose Mekhi Becton? And I think this is going to be, what Howie called it, a maintenance offseason when it comes to free agency. I don't think it's going to be as splashy. I think it's going to be a foundational draft, offensive, defensive fronts, because they went a little bit off that foundation for, Zach Bond. That's what he was talking about.
Yeah.
When he was talking about not a characteristic, I forget the word he used, typical offseason for the Eagles. It's going to look a little different, he said. That's what he was talking about. And I think that returns back to the draft. We're going to talk to Ian Cummings in a little while, talk about the defensive front players, even the offensive line, but
there's a couple offensive linemen there. If they like them at 32, I think they could let maybe Mekhi walk. We'll see what happens though.
Well, it's difficult because you have to make the Mekhi decision before the draft.
Right.
So that's it. Everything's fluid. It's like I've often said the NFL should actually do the draft before free agency. I think that would make more sense from a team building philosophy. But that's a big whopper. But people don't like change.
And John, the way this sucker's set up, man, they're getting views all through the offseason. They're not changing that anytime.
Just from building team, I think it would be easier if you could have the draft first and then fill in from there in free agency. I think it would be easier but nobody, you can make an argument. It makes it, teams like the Eagles who have better strategies, it gives them a bigger advantage doing it this way. So I think it helps the Eagles. But overall, I think just from a general roster building philosophy, you'd like to draft the players you get and then see, all right, we didn't get this guy. We wanted this guy. We didn't get that. Now we got to fill this in. Just makes more sense. But it's not the way they do it.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with it. Johnny Mac, let's get the one super chat. And then as John mentioned, we're going to talk to Ian Cummings, who's doing draft work for Pro Football Network. He's one of the best. For those who have been listening to Birds 365 for longer than a year, you remember Ian Cummings from last year and the year prior at the NFL draft. So he does great work. We're going to talk to him in just a couple of minutes here on the show. So for everybody who loves the draft, which we have many of you in the chat, drop your comments down below. And maybe I'll read one of them off to Ian. Appreciate all you guys. Skid checks in. John, he says, morning, fellas. J-Mac, can you see the Eagles going after Bosa or Mack if they can't get Miles? So it came down last night that Joey Bosa was released from the Chargers. John, I don't see it. I don't like it. What say you?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it doesn't count against the comp pick formula. Now, I still think he's going to get too much money from but he's been, early in his career, I'd say, yeah, why not? But he hasn't been healthy for a while. So that part is factoring into it. I still think, especially now when you see what Max Crosby got, you kind of see where the edge market is going. That's a position people play. I think he's still going to be very expensive. And then, I don't know if he likes it here because when his brother was here, you had all that stuff, that kerfuffle. So I'm not sure if he even wants to be here, but he's an interesting player. He's certainly, if he's healthy, he's a great pass rusher. He got cut. So as I said, you're talking about, a former All-Pro, Pro Bowl player, third pick in the draft, yada, 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 production out the yin-yang. But I still think that plays into it. He's going to be too expensive. So, and then the part where, fans were getting on him a little bit and he didn't handle it well. I don't know. Chance to win a ring probably makes that go away pretty quickly. We know. We always talk, if you put on that uniform, they're going to love you. Micah Parsons could show up tomorrow and he'd be the savior. I'd say
Micah Parsons is different than Joey Bosa. Do you think he's a lot?
No, I mean from the hatred standpoint, the hatred of the player. I mean from that standpoint. Obviously, yes. I'm not comparing the two as players, but if he showed up, that's the best pass rusher the Eagles got. So, I'll say it that way. You have to look into it. He's only 29.
Any concern with the locker room with a guy like that? I know a lot of people put some stock in that. I don't know how you feel about it. You think he would fit this locker room, or do you not even look at that
I haven't met I haven't met him one day in my life. If he's I don't see why he wouldn't fit in.
I don't know.
Is
There's
there
like
something
I
else?
think there's a perception about the guy. I don't know him either, obviously, but I think there is a perception.
Is there something that I don't know about
No, I
Joey
don't think
Bosa?
so. I think people just view him as a snooty dude. I think people associate like
Well, that's
MAGA
what I'm
with,
saying. I mean,
yeah, like
yeah.
I don't,
Oh,
you know how the world is.
I mean, there's a lot of. Well, that's the thing. Somebody tweeted me the other day about Max Krause being the Eagles thing. That's evidently a
Yeah,
MAGA
that's
thing.
gone
He's
now.
a MAGA guy. He got $35 million. People, you got to get over it. Your
I
political.
don't care who somebody is. It doesn't
No, I
bother me
didn't know.
either
I
way.
just
I'm just
didn't.
telling
I
you
just
some-
didn't know where you were going with it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, that from Vic's standpoint, it's about is he fundamental and will he play disciplined? He don't give a crap if he's tweeting an Eagle because he's a Donald Trump fan. And Max Crosby got $35 million or whatever he got. So people got to get over the political bullshit.
I know.
My
I'm with
God.
you.
But anyway, yeah, sorry.
All right, good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, I'll give you a quick live read on BetUS for the great people, and then we'll talk to Ian Cummings coming up next from Pro Football Network, doing great draft work, one of the best in the business at covering the NFL draft. So he's going to join us in here in about a minute on Birds 365. Before we get to that, let me tell you guys about the great people at BetUS. Go and check them out. Use the promo code YouTube150. You get 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit. You get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. You got March Madness coming up right around the corner. You got the Eagles futures. Who's taking an Eagles future for next year after some of these moves? We'll see who does that. Big thanks to BetUS for sponsoring the show today. Go and check them out at betus.com.pa, and a big thanks to them for sponsoring the show. Let's go to our main man, Ian Cummings, joining us now here on Birds 365 from Pro Football Network. Give him a follow at IC_draft. Ian, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Thursday morning?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be back. It's been quite a while, but we're in the lead up to the NFL draft now, less than 50 days away. And man, this class is very exciting. Diving into it again, so many storylines, so many positions that have a lot of talent, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Good to see you, Ian.
Yeah, it's good to see you
draft
too.
Season. Yeah, Ian Cummings season, I like to call it, one of the best in the business. So it's glad to have you back. But I'm not as excited. Now, I know you're a draft guy, so I look at this draft, and we all do. People like me who just do it from the standpoint of, all right, the season ends, and for the Eagles here locally, it was so late. I feel behind the eight ball, trying to get caught up. Obviously, it's not a splashy draft from a quarterback's perspective, but did get to talk to Daniel Jeremiah. He admitted it's not the splashiest draft at the top, but he called it a starters draft. If you want to find a bunch of good players who can be starters in this league, this is your draft. Is that sort of how you phrase it? Maybe not the splash at the top, but good, solid players?
Yeah, and by the way, I the humble brag is not lost on me. Oh, we're the Eagles. We won the Super Bowl, so we can put off the draft
I don't
cycle
care
a little bit.
It makes life more difficult for me. I'm not an Eagles fan, but it does. What I'm trying to say is I'm not excited as you about this draft, and I think part of it is because I'm behind where I usually am in the prep for it.
Yeah, and to your point about what type of class it is one of those classes where last year we had Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Brock Bowers. We had all of that star power. Marvin Harrison Jr., the big three at wide receiver too. We had all of that star power last year. So to compare last year to this year, I think it's pretty clear that there's a juxtaposition there where there's not that type of star power in this class. That's not to say there aren't phenomenal prospects. I've been diving into it again. I'm hoping to start my final rankings next week, and I'll get more new evaluations on guys. And players like Armand Membu from Missouri tested out of this world at the combine. He graded very high for me on my initial viewing. So, a lot of guys that I think are under the radar, not a ton of star power, some good prospects though. And one lens that I like to look through the NFL draft at is, you can put a great prospect in the perfect situation and he can become an elite player, right? I look at Zach Bond for the Eagles, who just got re-signed to a massive deal. Yep. When he came out, people were looking at him like, we don't know where he's going to play. He's kind of a tweener. Yeah. He's undersized, but he's mainly an edge. And he entered the perfect situation for him with Vic Fangio. and he became an all-pro, one of the best linebackers in the game, right? So you can have a prospect who's viewed by consensus as, a day 2 guy, even an early day 3 guy, right? But all it takes is the proper situation, the proper mindset, and they can reach their potential. So there's plenty of variance in the outcomes. So I always try to keep an open mind.
That's a great way to look at it, Ian. John just asked you about the overall draft. What position groups, as you look at this thing right now, what are the deepest position groups in your opinion? And then conversely, what are the weakest position groups where teams might have to reach if they want to go that route?
Yeah, for sure. I think the running back class, a lot has been advertised about that class, and I think it definitely it's up there as one of the deepest position groups. Ashton Jeanty at the top, obviously. Amarian Hampton from North Carolina tested very well, and he had some great 2024 tape. But even going farther down the board, I know guys like Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson, the Ohio State duo. You got Devin Neal from Kansas, who's a great player. Bayshul Tootin ran really well at the NFL Combine, and I'm sure there's plenty more that I'm forgetting. DJ Giddens is one who's been very good. So that's a very deep class and a lot of talent in that group. And I know the Eagles are, set right now, obviously with Saquon Barkley. And I think they're losing Kenneth Gainwell potentially in free agency. So there is the potential to maybe get a guy in day 3. But if you want a guy in that range, this class has the depth to get done. The safety class is pretty good too. I think the safety class is a little underrated. The corner class is pretty good too. I know the Eagles just released Darius Slay as well. So maybe looking to add a zone corner in that scheme. I think there are a lot of options, especially on day 2. You could get some value there. But those position groups stand out to me as some of the deepest ones. Some of the weakest ones, I think linebacker is up there. I think linebacker, you have a couple guys at the top who are kind of hybrid pass rushing specialists, right? But they can cover as well. Jahad Campbell from Alabama is a great example. Jalen Walker, I look at him as more of a rush linebacker at the next level, but a great player again. Carson Schwezinger out of UCLA. But after that position group thins out. So I think looking at the Eagles, re-signing Zach Bond was obviously the right call, looking at his fit within the defense and what he's already done, because you're leaving it up to uncertainty if you rely on this linebacker class. Aside from that, the DT class is pretty good. I think the depth kind of peters out as you get farther down the board. The edge class is pretty strong. I would say the receiver class is kind of similar to the DT class. A few guys at the top, but not quite as much star power as last year's. Enough depth to get by. And then obviously the QB class is a little underwhelming at the top, but some guys who could intrigue.
I'm glad you brought up the linebackers there, because Campbell's the guy I wanted to ask you about. Because personally, I look at him and I say, most people seem to be looking at him as an off-ball linebacker. I kind of look at him and see a little bit, I don't want to compare to the players, but a little bit of Micah Parsons from the standpoint of when I looked at that draft, I said, this guy's a pass rusher. All right, maybe he doesn't have the arm length you want as a pass rusher, but he's just a natural. And everybody's talking about off-ball linebacker, and they drafted him as an off-ball linebacker, and all of a sudden, injuries, he gets a chance, and boom, he takes off. I'm not saying that's going to be Campbell, but I think Alabama moved him because of Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. That's it. I mean, he would have been playing the edge. What do you see him as?
Yeah, they always have an abundance of talent at Alabama, so they got to move guys around. It's just the nature of the game. I think with Jahad Campbell, I still look at him as an off-ball linebacker personally, but I think because the thing with Micah Parsons is that he played edge rusher in high school. I mean, he had an inbuilt history at the position, played off-ball at Penn State, and then they moved him back to edge rusher in the NFL. But he had a history there, and I think he was a little bit more built to play that position too. I think he's a little more rocked up than Campbell is in terms of, the compact mass in his frame.
Yeah, I don't want to compare him as players, but I just think the philosophy, I look at the player, and I don't see, with Bond, you mentioned Zach Bond. When Vic got a look, the Eagles actually signed Zach Bond to be a backup edge rusher and they thought he was going to be a tremendous special teams player, as he had been in New Orleans. And Vic got a look at him and said, I think he's got the instincts to play off ball. Mm-hmm. That's my concern with Campbell. I'm like, I just think he's a guy who goes straight ahead. I don't think he's got Zach Bond level instincts.
Yeah, I think with him, the big thing for Campbell is that, I think he can cover. You see him drop back. I think he's one of those guys who can drop into that middle zone. He's shown that he can adjust his hip leverage based on route, route relations and where guys are. And if they're working across face, he can run with them and things like that. And then when he's rushing downhill, I think he's at his best when he's rushing the passer, right? When he's attacking, getting an angle on tackles and using that explosion, that speed, that bend to really dip underneath the arc and kind of reduce that surface area. He's got that ability for sure. And to your point as well, I agree. I think the weakness right now is his 2-down game. When he has to read blocks in the run game, when he has to sift through congestion, right? Those are areas where you can see some of the inconsistency come up with him. So I would still have him as an off-ball linebacker, but I think in today's NFL, right, you need to be really creative with that second level grouping, right? Because, what the quarterbacks are seeing, if you can disguise looks, if you can kind of, deceive them pre-snap, that's a big weapon for your defense. And I think Jahad Campbell is the perfect player to do that because he's a guy who you can line up as an edge rusher, and then he can drop into coverage. He's got the range and the leverage awareness and the landmark awareness to do that, where he can get depth and then kind of use his athleticism to match guys in space, whether it be a tight end or a big slot wide receiver. Like, he's got that athleticism to do that. But then at the same time too, he can rush from depth, and he's got the explosion, the speed, and the bend to do that. So I think in terms of having a weapon at off-ball linebacker, kind of that hybrid weapon who can do whatever you want in the attacking phase, he's very good as that prospect. But I do agree. I think that where he needs to improve, where he stands to improve, is holding up in the 2-down game, whether it's reading blocks and disengaging or just sifting through congestion.
Sounds like a versatile player. We'll see where he ends up going. Ian, I want to ask you about edge rushers. Eagles are obviously picking down at 32. A lot of guys that look pretty good. I mean, a lot of guys that are very highly rated in that class. Who do you see as a guy that might be available at 32? I don't want to ask about Abdul Carter. He's going to be gone in the top 5. But who are some guys you think could be available down there in that first round? Because I have a feeling that's the way the Eagles are going to go. We'll obviously see. But who are some edge rushers you like that might be available late in round 1 that would fit the Eagles scheme?
Yeah, for sure. And the tricky part with the Eagles is that they have 2 guys at edge who are scheduled to be free agents, Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham. So you kind of have 2 archetypes that you're potentially looking at. You're looking at that athletic pass rushing specialist who can rush from 7 tech and wide 9. And then you're looking at kind of the burlier, stockier, more well-leveraged player who can rush from 7 tech, but can also play face up at strong side 5 tech defensive end, Brandon Graham. So, I think whatever you're looking for, you got to see where the valuation is at 32 overall. And I think there are a few guys that kind of fit multiple archetypes for them. If you're looking for that bigger guy who can do a little bit of both, Mykel Williams from Georgia, I don't know if he'll last that far. But I do know that the one thing I do know is that we don't know what's going to happen, right? There are always guys who drop farther than you expect. And I think Mykel Williams, especially with, the risers that we're seeing after the NFL Combine, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M is rocketing upwards because of his athletic showing. But I think Mykel Williams is honestly a more complete prospect on tape right now. And then he brings a lot of the similar boons with his size, his length, his explosiveness, his hip fluidity, right? He's a player who, you can use him on stunts and looping rushes, and his hips are always aligned where they need to be to exert maximum power. That's one of my favorite things about him. But then he can play 5 tech. He's a phenomenal run defender, and I think he is showing progress with his pass rush plan. So if Mykel Williams is there at 32, I think he's a tremendous fit. I think Nick Scordon from Texas A&M is another player who could be a really good fit. I think he measured in around 6'3", I want to say 250, 260 at the NFL Combine. So he's another pretty well-leveraged, burly dude. He's got the point of attack strength that you want in run defense, but he's also surprisingly finessed with his game. He can win with spin moves. He's got a pretty nuanced arsenal when it comes to double swipes and cross chops. The big thing for him is the bend is not it's not quantifiably elite, right? Which is kind of what you would expect with a guy who's as muscle bound as he is. He can't always sink and reduce the surface area the way the other guys can. But I think Nick Scordon definitely has appeal there. If we're talking about more athletic guys who can rush from space, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College is really good. I like him a lot too, man. The thing that pops up with me for him is that he's got the natural leverage at 6'2". He's pretty rocked up at 250, and he's got over 34-inch arms. So having that kind of length with that well-leveraged frame, because in the trenches, it's a battle of leverage. The low man usually wins, right? So he can get low, he can get underneath tackles, cause them to lurch, and he can use that length to deconstruct, get around the arc, and he's got the bend and the burst to do that too. I think he can be a pass rush cheat code at the next level, and I think the Eagles would really like to have him on the edge. Mike Green For Marshall is another one. I can't speak to the character issues. I know we've heard rumors of that off the field. That's something that each team will have to do their due diligence on, but he's another player who has that speed, that burst, that bend to win from wider alignments. And when Marshall played Ohio State this past season, he proved that he could compete against top end talent. So he's another one that kind of stands out within that lens. And there are a few more names that pop off in that range. Princely McMullen from Ole Miss is one that I've liked for a long time. I know he's not perfect. I think he has some work to do with consistency even now as a fifth-year senior, but he's a player who's got the talent. The farther you get down the board, the thinner the options become. But if the Eagles can come away with one of those guys, I think they'd be sitting pretty.
Let me ask you about one name I love just to follow up on edge rushers. I like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. I think he's that bigger guy, but I like some of the traits he has. How do you see that player?
Yeah, he's very unique because he has the size where you would expect him to be able to play like some interior alignments, like 4-eye, 5-tech even.
He's big.
Yeah, he's a big dude. He doesn't have elite proportional length. That's the thing with me. So there are some times, I think, especially in run defense, when he's not able to get downhill, where his pad level can become an issue, and then he can get outreached by tackles too. And I still think play strength is an issue as well. Coming out of 2023, you could see that he had the size and the length, but the play strength wasn't quite up to par with where you wanted him to be. But for his size, he's pretty explosive. I think he's really bendy and flexible. That's the thing that gets me with him. For a guy who's 6'6", 6'7", like he can get around the arc, he can reduce, he can pinch those pursuit angles, and he can get around tackles pretty easily, while sustaining his acceleration. So, when he flashes, the flashes are really, really intriguing because he's got the hand usage too. He has a pretty deep arsenal of moves. He's still fleshing it out, still adding that hand strength. But for me, it's just, can you work past the pad level, right? Because sometimes that is going to be an issue with taller guys. Naturally, they'll pop up too high. And then without elite proportional length, that's another thing that he's going to run into against NFL tackles. So I think if you get him in that 5-tech, 7-tech role, I think he could be a really good player, but he's got to continue to add play strength to reach his maximum potential.
You mentioned Stewart a little bit there in his performance at the combine. So he was a guy I thought maybe he could, because there wasn't a ton of production at Texas A&M. Maybe he could fall to the Eagles, but that's off the board. The way he performed, a guy who's supposed to go highly that didn't perform well, at least in some instances. When you look at the explosion, was James Pierce. What did you think of his performance? Because there was a potential top 10 pick at one point, certainly top 15, 20. And now all of a sudden, everybody looked at him at the combine and said the explosive numbers weren't great.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where the combine for me, we go back to how much stock you do put into the combine, right? Obviously, it's an important event for verification and things like that. But on the tape, he's very explosive. I think that's one of his chief calling cards. So, I'm going to defer to the tape whenever we see that. But when a guy doesn't test very well, or not as well as you would expect at the combine, I think one thing that you can look at is preparation too. And again, you don't want to make total inferences off of this, but, when a guy doesn't perform well, like it can be just as much preparation as talent, because these drills, you have to rehearse and practice the technique, right? For the 40-yard dash, you got to make sure you don't false start. You got to make sure that you're distributing your weight properly, right? With the vertical, for instance, like you got to make sure that you're distributing your weight into the jump and things like that. So a lot of little details that I think really, really give you a lens into the preparation behind the scenes, just as much as the talent, on the stage. And there was one, my draft colleague, Corey Kinnan, wrote an article and said that there were some whispers about character issues, potentially work ethic with James Pierce, maybe not being as coachable as other guys. And so, I do think that teams have to do their due diligence there, especially when you're spending such a high pick with him, because he's got the talent. I mean, that shows up on film. He's got the length, he's got the explosive ability on the vertical plane. The bend isn't quite elite for me. There are times where he can't always get his hips underneath tackles, but he's got the explosion and the power profile. All those things are there. It's just a matter of, is the underwhelming NFL Combine performance kind of a foretelling of things to come? Is this a guy who's not going to be able to reach his ceiling because he's not putting in the preparation? Obviously, it's a big assumption to make off of an NFL Combine performance, but I also don't want to skirt around how much preparation does matter for these drills. So if I was putting him up against some of these other first-round edge prospects, it would be something. It wouldn't concern me. It would definitely. I'd want to look into it more.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense completely. Talk to me about the 32 pick and like the disparity, because I've heard some people say there's not that much of a difference between like the 15th or the 20th player in the draft versus the 50th player in the draft. So if Howie were want to move up or move down, where are they sitting in terms of value at the 32 overall pick? How easy would it be for them to move up and down? I know it would obviously takes 2 teams to tango, but how big of a difference is there between that 15th and 50th prospect, let's say, based on where the Eagles stand now?
Yeah, no, I think, and I'll have to come back to this once I do final grades because I'm still getting into it with the tape watching process after coming back to the role. But when I came into it and, coming back to it, catching up a little bit this week, my gut feeling has always been that, maybe 10 to 15 blue chip guys in this class. And then once you get past that, it does trickle down a little bit. But there's a pretty wide, pretty vast tier 2 of guys where you get to like 50, 15, all the way down to like 60, 64, potentially. So if you're the Eagles, I think they're in a unique spot because, again, the roster, they just won a Super Bowl, right? The roster is still sitting pretty good. We know they can coach guys up too. So if you wanted to be really aggressive for a player who's fallen down the board, who fits your scheme really well, right? You could do that if you wanted to trade up into the top 16 or so, the top half. It's going to take a lot, top 20, but you could be aggressive if you wanted to. But even trading down, I think for the Eagles as well, that's a situation where you trade down from 32. I think you could get some comparable value in the day 2 range. So for me personally, I always like to, it's tough because, I don't want to answer with ambiguity, but you got to see how the board plays because there's a very good chance, we see players fall all the time. If there is a guy, a blue chip guy, a guy that you've circled on your board who's there at 32, you should take him. And once you get into that 20, 30 range, even as early as 15 to 20, that's where the variance of each team's board starts to come into play, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
Each team has a guy graded differently. Each team has different cultural fits for their evaluation too. So once that variance comes into play, we see some really off the wall results. We see that every year, right? So I think for the Eagles, they're in a great position. We've seen that, everyone talks about the Chiefs doing this too, just playing the board and getting a great player, because the board always hits you with those curveballs. I think the Eagles are in a position to benefit this year too, whether it's trading up or trading down. I think Howie Roseman has proven that he can be versatile there, and I think that's exactly what it needs to be.
If they do trade down, it's generally, you don't have to go back too far. The last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl was the 2018 draft, and that was the Lamar Jackson draft. And the Eagles traded out of 32 because Baltimore wisely wanted to go up and get that 50-year option with Lamar Jackson. I don't see that type of quarterback that somebody's going to want to leap up to the back of the first round to get. Is there that potential of that player in your mind?
In my opinion, no. I think, but again, every team's evaluation is different. I will say there are 2 guys who could potentially fit that definition because all it takes is one team, Well, I shouldn't say that. All it takes is 2 teams, right? It takes one team and then it takes competition because if you're one team who falls in love with the guy and you know that another team is in love too, you got to beat them out, right? So it takes 2 teams. But once you have 2 teams that are interested, that's when the price can start to get driven up for some of those guys who are in that second tier of QBs. I think Jalen Milroe is one who could fit that definition. Again, he's still pretty raw on the technical side. He needs to improve a few things, whether it be field vision. His mechanics are still a work in progress, although he has shown some development there over the course of the offseason. But he's a hyper elite physical talent. I mean, he's an incredible athlete. He's got a rocket for an arm. And by all accounts, he's very coachable. He's a great leader. He's a great worker. So all it takes is one team or 2 teams to fall in love with him. And then Jalen Milroe could be that guy at 32. If a team wants to lock down that 50-year option, we've heard a little bit of buzz about Jackson Dart from Ole Miss too, kind of being within that lens. Another guy who's very athletic, has enough arm talent. There are questions about the pro style translatability of that Ole Miss offense. But again, the scarcity at QB sometimes can drive the price up for those tier 2 QBs. It doesn't always, right? We think back to the Kenny Pickett class, right? Only one QB in the first round. And then there was a gap and then a few guys in round 3. And we know how that class aged. Brock Purdy ended up being the best one of the bunch. So, it's not always the case. The QB position isn't always inflated by default, but I think there is a chance that you get a couple of those guys who could potentially command value at 32 if they were to.
And I want to ask you about offensive linemen now, because it's always a good bet. If you don't know where the Eagles are going to go, just bet that they'll go in the trenches.
Yeah.
Who are some offensive linemen you like in this draft? Obviously Mekhi Becton is the free agent right now on that offensive line. We'll see if they end up bringing him back. But if he does get crazy money in the open market, I look at a guy like Tyler Booker from Alabama. Maybe he's a guy they could go. Who are some offensive line prospects you like and you could see the Eagles being interested in?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are in a good spot at 32 because, again, I think offensive line, when we were going through the positional overviews earlier, I neglected to mention offensive line, but I do really like the top of this offensive line class. I think you have a lot of diverse prospects. I think you have guys who can play tackle or guard. I think you have guys who you can transition and move around, and they have the traits that you want to mold. Tyler Booker is a fun one for the Eagles because, as we've seen with the Eagles, they're not always married to, I mean, obviously, I think in general, Howie Roseman likes to draft athletes, right? That's a pretty standard, correlation with him. But when it comes to the offensive line, sometimes we know Landon Dickerson, when he came out, he was a good athlete. I don't think anyone built him as an elite athlete. There were some injury issues too, but he's a bruiser. He's a mauler in the trenches, man. He sets the tone. And I think looking at a guy like Tyler Booker, I think his functional athleticism is more than good enough, especially for his size. If he's going to be playing at around 330 pounds, he's never going to be a guy who's going to cover an insane amount of ground as a pulling blocker, as a lead blocker, right? He's not that type of athlete. But for what you need him to do in a phone booth, moving laterally, matching pass rushers, right, keeping them within his center of gravity, keeping them within his reach, and just using that hand strength and that combative hand motion to win those one-on-one battles, I think Tyler Booker makes a lot of sense schematically for what they do. I would say Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas is another one if he falls to 32, which some mock drafts we have seen him falling a little bit. So again, he could be a guy who gets filtered out, gets to 32, and he played tackle at Texas, but I think he could be a really good fit at guard. He's a little high-hipped, a little stiff in the midsection too, which that's a reason that you see guys move to guard sometimes because they don't quite have the transition freedom to match the most athletic edge rushers. Right. But Kelvin Banks Jr., man, he's another mauler. He's very physical. He will bury you in the dirt if you give him the chance. He's got pretty good short area explosion. I think his proportional length is very good too, and he's got a low center of gravity, so he can win the leverage battle that you want. And those are a few guys that stand out. Donovan Jackson from Ohio State is another one I like a lot. He's a fun player because he shifted to left tackle when Josh Simmons went out down the stretch of this year, and he actually had just as good a left tackle tape as he had guard tape. So he's a fun player, but at guard especially, again, you talk about natural leverage, proportional length, combative hand motion, athleticism. Donovan Jackson has all of those things in spades. And then one more guy that I'll bring up is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Yeah. He's got to improve his play strength a little bit. He's a little bit lighter, but explosive, super physical. I mean, you want a tone setter, he will give you that. And he's got great leverage acquisition, great flexibility where he can kind of absorb power and then redirect it mid-play. So another fun player that I would like a lot to fit a guard. But ultimately, if you're the Eagles, I think you have a ton of options at that range. And that's another position where you could feasibly trade back and maybe get a guy like Jonas Savaiinaia from Arizona in the middle of the round, or Tate Ratledge from Georgia, another great player. So there are options in the interior line. I think the Philadelphia Eagles can play the board, see what happens.
I'm going to tell you who the Eagles pick is going to be, Ian Cummings. Okay. And I want you to tell me why it's a good pick, and I want you to tell me why it's a bad pick. And,
I got you.
Obviously, this isn't going to happen, but it's my early beats. If they lose Milton Williams in free agency, and if he falls, a lot of ifs, I think Walter Nolan, the Ole Miss defensive tackle, I think he's that guy at 32. They say, you know what? We don't want to trade down. We're just going to take him if he falls there. Good, bad, indifference on Walter Nolan.
I think at 32, I do like the value. He's a guy who's kind of, I imagine he'll file in that 30s range for me as a prospect, kind of just outside the round one barrier. Looking at his 2024 tape, obviously it was his most productive year yet. I think he had 6.5 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss. He was an All-American, 6'4", 295, 32.5-inch arms. So he's definitely got that power profile that you want. He is as explosive as anyone in this DT class. He's got enough proportional length to channel that explosion into power. And you think about what the Eagles like at 3-tech, I think he fits it to a T, right? Athletic guys who can drive power, who have that innate, that inbuilt athletic upside to mold. Walter Nolan definitely fits that to a T, right? So I think getting him in that locker room with those veterans, I think it would be a great situation for him. I think it's kind of a situation where at 32 the value lines up, and then I like the fit as well. So I still think there's room to improve his game. He's another guy who's a little stiff in the hips, and you kind of see that, especially in run defense, right? When he gets caught with combo blocks or double teams, he'll drift upright with his pads pretty easily, and then from there on out, it can be a little difficult to maintain the line, avoid displacement. And then, when they can win the trench battle, that's when running backs can start to gash you up, right? So I think leverage and run defense can still improve for him. But when you look at his pass rush ability, this guy can rush from 3 tech, 4-eye, 5 tech. He can just he's a battering ram when he gets going, man. He's so powerful. And then he actually improved his pass rush plan a little bit this year. We're seeing more, in 2023, he was just a battering ram. I mean, he would only rush straight ahead. He would blast through with his power. And if that didn't work, his counter game was not very strong at all. This year, you saw him rush across face a little bit, use swipes and rips. And I think that's a great development to see from a guy this talented. So at 32, I love the fit. I love the value. And I think it's a great replacement for Milton Williams if he wants.
All right. Ian Cummings. I get the thumbs up for me and Cummings.
Yes,
I like that.
I like Walter Nolan. We'll see how it shakes out. Ian, before you go, I do want to ask you about just kind of the general top of the board. I know it probably won't pertain to the Eagles, but I'm interested in your thoughts on that. But I do want to ask you this question from one of our great viewers, Bob Brown. Ian, he says, ask Ian, who is this year's Jalix Hunt, the kid from a nowhere school who could shock everybody? I think that's a good question. Any guys from the smaller schools you've picked up on yet, Ian?
Oh man, this is a tough one because I'm still getting into the swing of things since coming back to the role.
I figured that because the small schools take a back seat to the top.
Come back to me in a couple weeks or a few weeks next time I'm on. A couple guys that I like in the day 3 range that I'll throw out there. Tyler Barron at Miami. He was at Tennessee for a few years and they transferred to Miami. He's a player who, we talked about the archetypes for the Eagles needing that 5 tech, strong side defensive end, or a guy who can rush from 7 tech and wide 9. Tyler Barron is a guy who can do all of those things, in my opinion. He when he was playing at Tennessee, he was around 6'5", 260. And they were rushing him at 3 tech because, again, he was so powerful. He was like a Lucas Van Ness type. But then he goes to Miami and he's showing bend. He's showing hand usage along with that explosion in size. So if you can get him on day 3, he might sneak into day 2. But if you can get him on day 3, I like Tyler Barron a lot. And then another guy, these aren't small schools, so I apologize. I will do the homework on that for next time.
You're just getting back into it,
But Braden Swinson, LSU, is another one. He was a really highly touted recruit coming to Oregon when he initially went to Oregon. Then things didn't work out there. He didn't really get a ton of playing time. He transferred to the LSU, and then he broke out this year, man. I mean, he was super productive. I think he had 7 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. Another guy who's around 6'3", over 250, I think close to over 33-inch arms, maybe close to 34, but explosive. He's got great bend. He's not quite as strong and powerful as a Tyler Barron type, but if you need a guy who can rush from 7 and 9 and just get around the apex and use that explosion to terrorize QBs, I really like Braden Swinson, and I think he deserves a little more love in this class. So a couple edge guys that stand out to me there.
Yeah. At IC_draft, make sure you follow Ian on the X platform. Does a tremendous job. ProFootballNetwork.com. One of the best draft guys in the business, as you can tell. He knows his stuff. I wonder, Anthony Belton, because offensive tackle, North Carolina State, mentioned he's already got a top 30 visit lined up with the Eagles. That, people overrate that kind of stuff. But I look at that player and I say, all right, that's their Mekhi Becton contingency. I think they're going to move him inside. He's got this huge body. What do you think of him as a prospect, where he'd kind of land?
Yeah, and he's one I have to refresh a little bit on, but from my evaluation before the season, because he was a starter at NC State for a long time. I think 3 or 4 years. So he
was a tackle,
Yeah, he was a tackle. So I think around 6'6", 330 at least. I mean, his nickname is Escalade, so he's a big dude. He carries a lot of mass.
Nickname. That's a good nickname.
It's a good nickname, man. I can see the Eagles fan base getting behind that right away. But he's strong, powerful. All the things that you would expect with that frame. But then for his frame too, I don't think he plays too tall. I think he's got good knee bend. I think he's got pretty good weight distribution when it comes to, staying within his center of gravity and using that power and strength. The thing for me is, like, athletically, Again, I don't think you're getting an elite mover inside. I don't think he has elite range as a puller or things like that. So you might, if you shift him inside, might be a little limited in terms of scheme variety. But again, if you're looking for a guy who's big, powerful, strong, heavy hands, and then, if you keep him in a phone booth, he'll do what you need him to do. I think Anthony Belton makes a lot of sense. He might be available on day 3. It's going to be really interesting to see where the middle of this offensive line class shakes out, because I could see there are a lot of guys who could sneak into day 2, right? Or could move back a little bit. It just depends on where teams see them. But I think he could be a great value get. And we know the Eagles, they know how to coach offensive linemen up. That's the biggest thing with them, right? It's not always a case of, needing to invest in round 1, because if you see a guy with the proper talent, the proper mindset later on, they can make them who they, can be potentially with enough development. So I like the idea of seeking out those value deals. And I think Belton's a great option.
Yeah, and you look at the left side of that offensive line. Landon Dickerson was a second-round draft pick. Cam Jurgens was a second-round draft pick. And Jordan Mailata, obviously, a seventh-round draft pick. Last question for me, Ian. How do you see this top 10 playing? I know it doesn't pertain to the Eagles, but just a general draft question. I've seen Abdul Carter. I've seen Cam Ward. I've seen Travis Hunter. How do you kind of think that shakes out with those teams at the top? Because there is some quarterback-needy teams there, but there's also some really special prospects with Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, there's QB needy teams. There's not a ton of QBs, and there are a lot of really good prospects, non-QB prospects at the top, like you said. So I think one of those QBs is probably, if I had to bet, I would say one of them does go number 1 overall, just because you have so many QB needy teams in the top 10. You've got the Titans, we've heard they're looking to trade out, right? So, the Giants or the Browns could trade into number 1 to get, I think it would be Cam Ward if it was going to be anybody.
Yeah, I agree.
I think his throwing talent is just, it's separated in this class. You have a lot of guys who are good, who are decent, and then Cam Ward as a creator, as a thrower, just his arm elasticity, his creation capacity is elite. It truly is. So I think that separates him at the top. I would see one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter going top 3 as well. I think Armand Bamboo, I mentioned him earlier, from Missouri. Yeah. I think he could surprise some people with how high he goes. I could see him going as early as number 4 to the Patriots.
Wow.
And then I think once you get to number 8, 9, 10, I don't see him dropping out of the top 10. Looking at his tape, Armand Bamboo is just so talented. And then he's low to the ground. He's got proportional length. He's athletic. But then his tape is really clean too. Really good footwork, really good hand usage. And he's a pretty instinctive, aware player in the running game too. So I like his tape very much. He might be my OL1 when it's all said and done. And I could see him going as high as 4. The wide receiver position will be interesting. I could see Tet McMullen going as high as the Jets potentially, right? And then maybe the Saints at number 9. But I could see him slipping a bit too, because he didn't test. I know for guys with his kind of size, there is always the concern of, just how athletic is he? How proficient as an independent separator is he? So could Matthew Golden surpass him as a top receiver? I don't know. If I had to break down by position,
you could run past him. I know that.
Yeah, exactly. You could run past him for sure. So that's something there. Yeah. But if I had to break down the top 10 by position, I would lean at least one QB. Maybe Shadur Sanders breaks in, but I don't see anything elite about him as a prospect physically. And even on the operational side, there are some concerns. I think he's accurate. I think he's a good processor, but is he the kind of guy who can elevate your team? I still don't know, right? So we don't know how teams are going to value him.
I'm with you, Ian. If people's by Las Vegas, I think you could see the Aaron Rodgers like drop on draft night. Do you think he could fall in the second round?
I don't think he could fall in the second round. I think there's enough QB needy teams. We talked about the 32 scenario, right? Someone trading back in. I think Shadur is a prospect where if he were to fall that far, I think someone would jump in.
32, baby. Howie will take advantage and trade out. Somebody will pick up.
I still think it's unlikely, but I think he might fall quite a bit if he gets past the Raiders.
He's another one. I'm really eager to do a final eval on him because again, we've seen it's the media. It's the media trend. Every time something like this happens where you don't have a really dense class at the top with QBs, someone's value is going to get inflated in these mock drafts, right? And I'm not saying Shadur Sanders is a bad prospect. I really loved his accuracy, his touch. I think there is some creative ability and talent there for sure. But again, physically, I don't think he's anything more than above average as a creator and an arm guy. And then even as a processor, right? Not a ton of NFL level reads in that offense, a lot of line of scrimmage work, right? So is there anything that screams top 5 pick to me? I'm not so sure, right? So it depends on a lot of variables, right? But I do think his range is a lot wider than most.
Good stuff. Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network covering the draft again at IC_draft. Make sure you give him a follow. Ian, thanks so much for joining the show today, man. Great to catch up with you again. We look forward to talking to you again before the NFL draft. All right, brother?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Xander. Thanks, John. Appreciate you guys.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ian.
Great stuff there from Ian Cummings, breaking down the NFL draft. That's as good of a breakdown as you'll get here as it stands on March 6th. So I love the way Ian talks about prospects, John. He really gets
into
he's really super thorough, and he really gets into, the strengths and the weaknesses and where they can improve and fits for teams. It's pretty impressive the way he breaks down prospects.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. As far as I'm concerned, he's one of the best in the business, and I'm glad he's back. I'm glad it's draft season. I call it Ian Cummings season because we've had him on for a number of years. Nobody breaks down prospects better than Ian. I truly believe that. Even on the national level, you'll see the big guys on it. They don't break it down as well as Ian does.
Yeah, he does, and he makes it consumable for people to understand what he's saying. Really good stuff from Ian Cummings, and we'll have a bunch more draft guys on. Obviously, as we lead up, you heard Ian say it, less than 50 days until the NFL draft, and I know people are saying now they're not as excited for the draft. I'll talk to you when we're 20 days out. You'll be all jacked up for the NFL draft. So we'll get Rick Saratella back on, hopefully, on the show. Remember Matt Manicherian, John? I want to talk to Matt Manicherian. He does great work from Sports Info Solutions. He did good stuff. So we'll get all of our draft guys back on here on Birds 365 through the offseason. But pretty good stuff there, and pretty good prospects. I think the Eagles, the one thing about this class, John, is at least it seems to me that they're going to have a lot of options, whether they want to go up, down. I mean, there's always that with the draft, but sometimes
I can't imagine them going up.
I
can't imagine them going up. But you never know with Howie. And Ian's right. It only takes one player to fall, and there's always surprises on NFL draft day because I think these narratives get sunk in, and there's a lot of copycat, draft guys that just, all right, this is what Jeremiah says, so I'm gonna lean to what Jeremiah says, or Mike Mayock back in the day, and there's a lot of confirmation bias, and all of a sudden somebody drafts. Bill Belichick was famous for occasionally drafting somebody. Oh, what? That guy's not a first round pick. Well, he is to the New England Patriots. Teams don't pay attention to your favorite draft nick, even Ian Cummings. They're doing their own homework. And that's why I have these types of surprises. And that's one guy, like I mentioned that Shedeur Sanders, dropping quite a bit. I think he might drop quite a bit. Talking to people around the NFL.
Down. He doesn't really see anything super elite about Shedeur. I kind of feel the same way. I don't know. Is he getting gassed up because of, the name and the family and everything?
Well, part of it's the family, part of it's the name, part of it's that there's a lack of quarterbacks. And, after Cam Ward, who are you going to go with? And the thought that teams are going to be desperate. And usually they are, but sometimes they aren't. And you don't have to go back too far to the Kenny Pickett draft where everybody said, all right, nobody's good enough, so we're not going to take him. And maybe they go out and sign Sam Darnold because they don't believe in, the Raiders. What if the Raiders go out and sign Sam Darnold free agency? They're not taking him.
And that's a better move, I think.
Well, dependent, certainly better player right now, but you probably have to pay him $40 million.
Yeah, I know. Do you want to compete or do you want to be in nothing land?
Well, exactly. So, all these things, and that's why free agency has such a big impact on the draft. So, typically you can throw any mock draft, including mine. I'm not picking on anybody, but you can throw any mock draft into the trash the minute you read it. It's meaningless. It's useless. It's an exercise in futility. But when I say that, and I say that all the time, it's even more so before that first wave of free agency. Because if you're like I just joked, and I hope people realize it was a joke that I'm locking Walter Nolan in.
Yeah.
I think it's a possible.
Still probably have to say it though, John.
Yeah, I know, sadly. But, if the Eagles go out and sign somebody or re-sign Milton Williams, well, then I'm taking Walter away.
Right.
That's how quickly things change in the NFL.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out in the NFL draft. Should be pretty good, the prep to that, and obviously even closer to NFL free agency, just 6 days away. Next Wednesday, it'll kick off. And, we had 2 straight days of football 24/7. Will we have a third? John's not ready to say no, and neither am I. Maybe Mekhi Becton coming down the pipeline. But, John, a bunch of stuff to talk about after the commercial break here. We'll get to that commercial break. Now we got a super chat. Apparently some CJ Gardner-Johnson stuff Alexander Harris wants to talk about, so I'll get to that super chat. And I want to talk about a couple of other things here for this Philadelphia Eagles offseason and what they have planned and what's coming in the pipeline. So we'll do all that next on Birds 365. Before we get to the break, I want to tell you guys about the great people at BetUS. Go and check them out now. It's betus.com. Use that promo code YouTube150. It gives you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. You get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go get your March Madness bets in. Go get your Eagles futures bets in. Maybe bet on who the Eagles are taking in round 1. Whatever you can do on BetUS. Go and check them out today and use that promo code. And a big thanks to them for sponsoring the show today. We'll be right back in 3 minutes on Birds 365.
The following is a real testimonial from the father of a young injured victim.
I didn't think she was going to make it.
Major Perry's daughter was the victim of a horrific accident caused by someone else's negligence.
If you don't find the right counselor, law firm that you're looking for, you will get lost in the wilderness.
Badly injured? Call the Fritz and Bianculli Law Firm at 215-458-2222 and find out why they say, "We got this."
Ignite your nights with free live entertainment daily, only at Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia's Center Bar. 7 days a week, enjoy some of the region's top party bands, performers, and DJs as they take the stage in the heart of the casino action. Great cocktails, live music, and lively moments. It's all happening at Center Bar at Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia. Visit livecasinophilly.com for more details and the complete list of upcoming events. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Your financial future is on the line. Are you ready for what's next? At Leone & Company Wealth Management, we help young professionals, business owners, and pre-retirees navigate the complexities of building and protecting wealth. For young professionals, we'll help you grow your wealth, plan for your future, and make the most of your hard-earned dollars. For business owners, we provide strategies to protect your company, manage risks, and create a lasting legacy for both your business and personal wealth. For pre-retirees, we'll design a plan to secure your retirement, ensuring you can live comfortably and confidently in your next chapter. Whether you're just starting out, managing a thriving business, or preparing for retirement, we're here to help you take control of your financial future. The first consultation is on us. Get the advice you need without the cost. Let's make your financial vision a reality. Take the next step. Scan the QR code to schedule your free consultation today. And of course, go Birds.
In our hometown, we all look out for each other. We step up to keep our communities going strong. And at Independence Blue Cross, we're here to keep you going strong as the #1 health insurer in the region. No IBX is always looking out for you.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander. Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen, the #1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Give us a follow on X. For me, it's at Real Zander. Come on, I expect to see all you guys over there. And at Johnny Mac, it's at JF McMullen. Johnny Mac, good stuff from Ian Cummings. And in the first hour, we obviously recapped some of that Vaughn the Bond contract that came yesterday, a big deal for this team to get him under contract. And now as we, move into, the next phase of the offseason, what do you think is the next order of business for this team? Is it Cam Jurgens, John? Or, I wanted to ask you about Cam Jurgens. Because
can I say before we get into Cam real quick?
Yep.
Because in the break, I was talking about mock drafts before. Charles Davis, who is a tremendous guy, by the way, did his mock draft on NFL.com, NFL Media. Listen to these top 3 picks. Tennessee, Shedeur Sanders. Cleveland, number 2, Cam Ward. Number 3, the New York Giants, Jackson Dart.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, I
love Charles Davis too.
I love Charles. If Joe Shane does that, I mean, he should just resign and disgrace. I mean, if you like the player, all right, go trade down and go get some other assets and get him at a more representative position. I don't think people get the draft. It's not only about the player, it's about the value. Now, if you're that high and you believe and you think you're the smartest guy in the room and you think Jackson Dart is worthy of being the 3rd overall pick, I mean, that's ballsy. I'll say that. He's also got the Eagles getting Jahad Campbell at 32. So,
all right, I'll take that. I like Jahad Campbell, but we'll see about him. John, I know you're.
Anyway, sorry.
I know you're done doing this, but another feather in the cap of this Eagles front office, man. They're great at draft value. Even when they take a player, though, it feels like they always figure out how to get an extra pick in another year or add picks. I mean, they're so good at that, John.
I feel because for many years, and I say it all the time, Mike as well, Mike Gill, our buddy Mike Gill, he got the same hate when I would say how good Howie was at his job. I have all the hate mail. I have all the receipts. And now people go to the other extreme, and I feel I have to pull it back a little bit, like this week. I mean, this is not splashy stuff other than splashy players. This was part of the plan. Nothing is off plan. Nothing has changed. Haven't lost the player. Let's see what happens when the first punch is thrown. And I expect the Eagles to do very well because they generally do very well. They generally are better prepared. They have better plans. They have better contingencies. But again, the human mind is an interesting thing. Everybody knew Saquon was going to be here next year. He's coming off the best rushing year in NFL history. 99% of the people knew Zach Bond was going to be back. And we'll see if he can back up a tremendous first-team All-Pro season.
That resume, though, Johnny Mac, that Howie Roseman resume, man, getting pretty.
Oh, yeah, he's in people's heads.
Yeah.
What he does, and I brought that up when he, what he did, Barkley, when he did, I thought the calendar was very important to, signal to teams and signal to players and agents, hey, we're going to take care of you if you come play in Philadelphia. I thought that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
And a big, feather in his cap for that as well, because that's just smart business. I don't think Cam Jurgens is next, to get to your original point. Sorry for interrupting. Right. Simply because he just had back surgery.
Yeah.
And now typically if he were completely healthy, and this is I don't have any information on the back surgery, how serious it was, but anytime, from my personal perspective, anytime I hear spine, there's a little bit of a
I'll say, me too.
And, nerve damage concerns me because I've seen that go in a bad direction.
By the way, John, I mean, you talk about the back. This is also a guy that's got 300-pound defenders hitting him constantly over and over again. I mean, that makes me nervous.
So when you talk about, typically the Eagles are proactive. So I get why people go, Cam's eligible. Cam's a very good player. The Eagles are proactive. I get all the dots align, but he just had surgery. So I think that may back it up a little bit. Not that, if the Eagles are comfortable medically with what went on, and their doctors certainly have more information than I do, maybe it is a possibility, but I think it'll at least back it up a few months until I see him on the field and doing something.
I could see that being like a training camp potential
Yeah.
extension. Yeah, somewhere around there. We'll see about Cam Jurgens. I thought he might be the next order of business, but I'm with you. I think they're going to hold off with that back thing. By the way, we were talking about Howie Roseman. The other thing I love about Howie is I love how weird he can be, and I think that I view the word weird as a good thing. I think I'm weird.
Oh,
I think everybody has their own version of weird. That's what makes us all humans. But
he wants to be a stand-up comedian. Yeah,
did you hear him?
You're talking about the sex thing?
Yeah, he's talking about sex. I'm like, Joe Howie, what are we talking about here? But man, it's entertaining. It's like he is a second career coming up.
Howie thinks he's a comedian, and he tries. If you'll notice, he tries to land a joke or two every press conference.
You know what? I think he's getting funnier too. He's becoming a better GM, and he's getting funnier.
I don't know about the funny part because they usually don't land. But yeah, he's an interesting guy.
I think they land, man. Maybe it's just because I love the way he's building the football team, but I found it very funny. Even just like why say that? But again, it was funny. That's Howie for you.
Yeah, he turned into Big J Okerson. He went blue, talking about sex all the time. Yeah, I don't know. That was an interesting way to go. Yeah.
Of all the analogies he could have used, he went down that road. But good stuff there.
By the way, for comedy fans, Big J, by the way, I mentioned him. First of all, he's local. He's a Philly guy. And he's an Eagles fan. So
I don't know Big J. I know some comedians. I'm not huge on I do like it, but I don't seek it out. But there's a couple I know. I don't know Big J.
He's very good with crowd work, as they call it.
Yeah, that seems to be what everybody does nowadays. They kind of go in and they talk to the crowd all day.
Yeah. He's very good with that.
Yeah, good stuff. Big J there. I looked him up. I see him. Big J Okerson. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Good stuff. A couple other guys that are funny too. Johnny Mac, next order of business that I'm wondering about here is obviously we've talked about the tight end and the need to potentially, get a longer term solution there, but I don't really see one right now. So my question for you is a Dallas Goedert extension potentially coming? And would you rule that out? I think, and John, can you correct me on this, I think he's out of guaranteed money on his deal, so something is probably going to happen to that deal this offseason, or am I wrong on that?
Not completely. They might do something. The problem with Dallas is, he's 30. Yeah. I forget when he's going to be 31. I'll have to look that up, but he's got, let's see, 2025. He's his cap number's pretty high, 11.8. It's probably a little bit higher than they'd like it to be. He's got some guaranteed money, but not a ton of money. Next year's really the issue. Well, they'll certainly have to do something before then. And look, I think they're going to draft a tight end. I think they're going to draft Dallas Goedert's replacement. There's some people that think they might even trade him this year. A, not going to get a ton for him. B, again, pre-June 1st, you're losing about $10 million, $9.5 million in cap space. Post-June 1st, you gain a little bit, but again, you're not getting the draft capital early. Now, the Eagles have always looked at future draft capital as sort of a market inefficiency. So they're willing to go down the road to say 2026. But more importantly with Dallas Goedert, all right, if you want to trade him, who's replacing him?
That's what I'm saying with the trade. I don't see. That's why I said extension. Are we at a point where they might just keep him for another 2 years?
I don't know, but that's where the age comes into it.
He just turned 30 in January, so I feel like he could play good for 31 and 32 years old.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, and he played very well down the stretch, so I think that helps when he came back.
I know you hate the glass stuff, and I'm not calling him that, but I do think the injury concerns with him are a factor in this.
Well, that's part of it. He does miss a few games every year, and part of that is because of the way he plays. I love how people talk about the glass stuff, and then when he push, when he destroys somebody, then all of a sudden it's the greatest thing ever. But anyway, that part of the reason why he gets hurt is because he's so physical. But I always go back to that 2018 draft for two reasons: Lamar, but also because of what they did. And Zach Ertz was phenomenal for those who forget at that time. And in fact, when they drafted Dallas Goedert in 2018, that was the year that Zach Ertz had an NFL record 116 receptions as a tight end.
Which is absurd.
Yeah. And he was 2 years younger than Dallas when they were trying to think about the future.
Right.
And by the way, in 2019, he had 88 catches, Zach Ertz. So I think this is a deep tight end draft. They're going to draft a tight end, maybe in the second round.
Yeah, I think
whether they trade down from 32 or take him at 64. There are enough tight ends. If they like somebody, that's a potential. And then you start the clock on when is the new guy going to replace Dallas Goedert. If they can't do that, they got to get more depth, and they've already tried, in low-key ways. I brought it up a couple times. They signed Nick Muse late in the season, and they re-signed him as a futures guy. Cameron Latu, who's an Alabama guy, was a third-round pick in San Francisco a couple of years ago. They've already indicated they know they need to get more depth. But for those looking to trade Dallas Goedert before you get a tight end, who the hell you think Grant Calcaterra is going to be the starting tight end?
There's no replacement. And people are talking about like a Kyle Pitts trade. I don't know what you think about that player. I'm not overly in love with him. I'll say that. I know he's got upside. I know he's from the area, but not much.
I mean, the area stuff always kills me. I mean, he's a great athlete, but I think the Eagles, remember what the Eagles are.
He's a glorified wide receiver.
You want another skill position player?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Kyle Pitts trade rumors to the Eagles. But
I haven't either, but I've seen some people talk about they might want to move off him.
I
don't know if they're true or not.
I don't know. The Eagles to me need more of and there aren't a lot. Now, the one that makes some sense is Michael Mayer from Las Vegas, because he can play inline. The Eagles need a guy who can block at tight end.
Yeah, I agree.
So Michael Mayer, I wouldn't hate at all. I don't know the health and that he didn't play a lot last year, but he was a great college player. He can play inline. But they have to get better depth before they even think about moving on from Dallas Goedert. Now, with that said, he's under contract this year. Generally, don't want to, and then the void years start. So a short-term tweak wouldn't shock me. But I don't see anything major. Like, they might, guarantee his full salary, his full allocation this year, maybe give him a little bit on top of that. But I don't think you're going to see any long-term extension, because I think they're thinking about the future tight end.
Yeah. Well, this is my prediction. And I'm going to make my prediction on the tight end now. I think they're going to draft one in the third round, maybe a Harold Fannin, or I like Elijah Arroyo. I think he's not bad. A couple other guys in there, maybe a Mason Taylor, Gunnar Helm. They seem to like somebody like that. And then I think they're going to give him a 2-year extension. I don't see, just because of what you explained, there's no replacement. So like we talked about this 2-year Super Bowl window, this 3-year Super Bowl window. Who is going to come in and replace Dallas Goedert and improve your offense, or not be a hole on offense in the immediate future? A third-round draft pick? I don't think they're going down that road.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way they're moving on from Dallas Goedert until they figure something out.
They're going to get the guy in the pipeline, get Goddard under contract for another year or two, and go from there. That's how I see it, but maybe I'm wrong.
And the complication could be, if they don't want to go more extensive and they just want to tweak something this year, because they do probably have to tweak something in this year for Dallas. Does that, make him want to push it and say, all right, well, I'd like to go somewhere else, and that type of thing. So the business aspect comes into it as well. But yeah, that's a complicated one. But I look at it from the standpoint of they just don't have a replacement.
Yeah.
So they got to do something, and they got to figure out something with Dallas Goedert. Unless they have a real lot of confidence that a rookie could step in, or you get a Michael Mayer or something like that. There's got to be something else. There's got to be something else.
I mean, the only rookie that I see that really would come in and have a huge impact is probably Tyler Warren. Now, a lot of people like that Colston Loveland. I like him too, but you're not getting either of those two guys.
No, you're not getting either. And even them, I mean, long term, you'd like them both. Yeah. But, you'd probably struggle a little bit early. You're not going to get a Dallas Goedert level play even with those guys early.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be Brock Bowers in year one.
No. So, yeah, and you're not going to get them either. You're not going to be in a position to get either one. So, it's very difficult, but they do have to work something out with Dallas Goedert for this year, and they'll probably kick the can down the road to 2026.
Yeah, so that's why that extension, you move it back. I mean, and it opens up that Super Bowl window. You're not an immediate need,
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be longer term than that. And I think Dallas will understand that from the injury perspective, but we'll see how it shakes out.
Here's a good one here from Takeem Hilton. Loveland may fall to 32. Let me give you a scenario. If Loveland did fall to 32, do you think the Eagles would make that pick? I don't think they'd make that pick. I think they want trenches.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see the board, but I don't think they would. I think if they're taking a tight end, they're trading back.
Yeah,
just like they did when they drafted Dallas. They traded back from 32. That's the year he got drafted.
Yep, I remember that. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, let's get to a super chat here. I want to get to our super chat, and then I got another good question for you coming out of that. I don't know what we got here. Alexander Harris throwing some drama into the show today. On Twitter, CJ Gardner-Johnson is in his feelings because Slay said he feels Blankenship would be the leader in the secondary if he leaves, and didn't mention CJ. This is the most sensitive shit I've seen in a while. I can't confirm or deny whether that's true, Alexander Harris, but if it is, that's some sensitive shit right there.
Yeah, I mean, CJ, for those who don't know, is a lot to handle. He's just, I don't know what to say. I mean, Slay's out there, and that's part of the problem when you have these podcasts and these things that all players seem to do now. You mention a guy, I took that and I said, wow, Slay's really, talking up Reed Blankenship, and Reed is the leader of the secondary. He's already the leader of the secondary on the field. He's the guy that Bick says is the leader.
That communicates, right?
Yeah. And Slay's just talking about it. And I said, well, that's nice of Slay to give Reed some play. And then, CJ's,
is that what it was about? I saw his tweet yesterday, and then I saw him say, look, it's nothing about the team or something. I don't know. I didn't look much into it because, to be honest with you, I don't have time for CJ Gardner-Johnson's Twitter controversies. But
yeah, and he tried to rescue it. He said, this is 36 minutes ago. So he said, vet presence is always needed. Don't get me wrong, but what vet is needed when young guys can hold their own? Q and Coop, and you got a crazy duo with Reed and me. So he's talking up Reed a little bit there. The supporting cast, Ringo said everybody. Say Andre, Sam, Eli, Sidney, Tristan. Stay with the youth if you ask me. But CJ just.
So is he now saying don't bring Slay back?
No, I don't think it's
that's kind of what it said. Now, I'm not on Twitter. I didn't see it.
I mean, I haven't. There's a whole. He's been doing it for a while, but
sometimes
there's some stuff you have to ignore with CJ. Is how I would describe it.
I just shut the fuck up. I mean,
he's a really good player.
Really I know he is. I actually like him, and I think that mentality has more use than people think. But
I'll say this, when you're not a really good player and you're not producing at a high level, and this has been throughout his career. You've already seen it. People are going to move on quickly. That's how I would describe it. So you better keep playing at a high level, or people are going to move on quickly.
I mean, the last vet that replaced me helped y'all get to the door in the wild card round. Remember that. Boy, he is a wild card, man. He is a wild card. I actually, see, the funny thing is, while I call him, while I say what I said about his Twitter antics, I actually like it. I just wish it was channeled a little bit better, because I think that aggression gives you an edge in a game like football, where you're playing against a bunch of alpha dudes. It's a physical sport. It's physical by nature. When you have that edge mentally, or at least you feel like you have that edge mentally, I think it's an advantage on the field. But to go on Twitter on March 6th, I mean, what are we doing here, CJ? Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if you're in the CJ Gardner-Johnson business, this is the business you're in. And that's why New Orleans got out of it, and that's why Detroit got out of it, and that's why Philadelphia got out of it the first time. But he can play. And he had a great second half last season.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, you're going to have to deal with some of this stuff if you want CJ.
I mean, did this just complicate if you wanted to bring back Darius Slay? People will say no, but I mean, now
I get the feeling the Eagles, are pulling the plug there. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, they're trying to be disciplined. He's going to be 35, as I said, New Year's Day, 2026. I mean, I think they're trying to say thank you and move on, but we'll see how it shakes out. And just go Ringo, or at least, that's plan A. But yeah, I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps.
Yeah.
But I don't think what Slay said, if anybody saw what Slay said on his podcast, he basically said who would be the leader, the leader of the secondary. And he said Reed, who already is. He's the leader when on the field. He's the leader when Slay is out there.
Yeah.
It's always a safety. It's not an insult to Slay either. When you're talking about getting the secondary line, it's always a safety. And Reed's the guy that Vic leans on, and Vic has already said that publicly.
Well, I don't dislike the anger. I told you that. One of my favorite players in the team is Jalen Carter. One of my favorite plays of the season this year was when Jalen Carter slapped the shit out of that Steelers player. I don't know if you remember that. Who was that? He just like hit him across the head. I was with
Jalen, like,
you got to channel it. You got to channel it.
Yeah, Jalen is the nicest, most understated kid on that team.
Yeah,
I would say.
You can tell by his interviews.
Most polite. Yeah. Just completely different. Whereas, CJ's a handful to deal with.
Alexander Harris follows up. Go look at his account. He's been on a rant this morning. There's more than that tweet. Look, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, but CJ is technically entitled to say what he wants. I don't want him to, create unnecessary drama, but I think that mentality can serve you well if you channel it the right way.
On the field, there's nothing to complain about.
Yeah, I agree.
Certainly in the second half of the season.
And Takeem brings up another good point here. I don't know who's the leader of the defense. I think that's been answered. All right, it's going to be Zach Bond after that contract.
I don't agree with that. The leader of the Eagles defense is Nakobe Dean, on-field leader. And he's the leader. He's the green dot. He's the guy who calls plays. That's not changing. If he's healthy.
You have any concern on Nakobe Dean going into next year?
No, not after I saw him. I said he's already off the crutches. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because he did mention he's got to not push it. But, I saw him a bunch when he was coming back from the Lisfranc surgery. He was not mobile for a freaking long time. He was on a rollabout, then he was on a crutches, then he had a walking boot. Long time. He was off crutches at clean-out day. 6 months is what I heard. He got injured against Green Bay on the wild card round, so that's early January. He should be back. Should be back certainly for week 1.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. Big Dom Schiano, what's up, Big Dom? Hope you're doing well, brother. Bring on the restructures and let's get Miles. And I'll add into Big Dom's comment here and ask you a question, John. A lot of people thought if you get Miles, maybe you won't be able to bring back or Bond. Well, Bond is back. Do you think that changed anything in the Garrett sweepstakes? Have you changed your opinion on the Garrett sweepstakes? What do you think's going on with that? Because I did read today, I believe the Browns restructured Watson to free up a bunch of cap space. So I don't know if they're making moves, shaking and baking. Maybe they're considering making a move or taking one of the trade deals that's been offered to them for Myles Garrett. But
no, they had to get under
on. Do anything change anything for you?
Well, the Watson stuff, no, they just have to be cap compliant by March 12th. So, for those, I was trying to explain that a little bit yesterday on restructures. There's a lot of misinformation about restructures. Like when you have these big contracts, specifically with the big contracts. Now, if you're going into the last year of your contract like Dallas Goedert, it doesn't apply. But you have these big long-term contracts like Jalen Hurts, Deshaun Watson. You see these. Cowboys just did it with Dak Prescott. These are levers in the contract that allows you to convert money and then reassess your cap space, gain a lot of cap space. Every team does it with these big contracts. Every time you hear Lane Johnson, that's what it's been. Mm-hmm. You don't need permission. It's built in. You just do it. It's
one of the reasons. I love the word you used earlier in the show, malleable. It's one of the reasons that the cap is so malleable.
Yeah. It's not like the Cowboys went to Dak Prescott and say, hey, Dak, we need $36.6 million. I'm looking. That's how much cap space they created.
Yeah.
35.8 for the Browns. They didn't need the permission of the players to do this. So I think that's very misunderstood. But for the Miles, nothing's changed. Cleveland's not trading them, number one. Number two, it'd be very difficult to trade him. Number three, it'd be very difficult for the Eagles to get him if they were to trade him. Other than that, all's fine on the Myles Garrett front. No, it hasn't changed. Now, things can change very quickly. Players do it all the time. He can make it clear that I'm not playing another game for the Cleveland Browns. And if he does that and it gets to that point and they believe it, then you might get to a situation where they have to feel they could do something. And then the Eagles would get involved and the Eagles would try to get the player because they love the player. But again, they're behind the eight ball from their asset standpoint.
Now, we had Marcus Hayes on yesterday on the National Football Show, and I'm a big fan of Marcus Hayes. I don't agree with everything he says, that's for damn sure, but I just like the way I like his thought process. I like the way he explains things, and he had a very interesting take on trading for Myles Garrett, and he's like, I wouldn't do it because, in a way, Howie has gotten to a point where he's seemingly mastered the art of roster building. It's been his best 2-3 year span in his career. And trading for Myles Garrett is essentially saying, I don't trust myself anymore. I need to go and get Myles Garrett to put me over the top. And I thought he explained it better than I just did. I'm just paraphrasing what he said. But I thought it was an interesting perspective where he was kind of like, stick to your philosophy. Your philosophy just won you a Super Bowl. Don't blow that up just because there's one shiny object out there that's 30 years old. I thought it was an interesting take on the Myles Garrett front. I know the player is great, but you put any credence to that? It's kind of worded, kind of what I was thinking earlier, where I didn't word it as good as Marcus Hayes did, but the bad teams blow things up to go and get a 30-year-old aging guy. I feel like they do. I know this player is different, but
I don't know. You would say a bad team would give $14 million to an aging running back who's had a bunch of touches on a bad team.
That's fair.
I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, I would argue that, this is the Howie step, how he moves. because he believes in the player. Look, if you believe in the player, again, this ain't a normal player. That's the difference. That's where I disagree with Marcus. Like, why would you think this is going to blow up on you? Why? This guy's so much better than everybody else. It's the same thing that they to a more definitive degree, not now, 12 months ago, a more definitive degree than Saquon Barkley was. This player is special.
Is it a disciplined move, though, John? You use that word a lot with this front office.
To get the best potential football player in the world. Yeah, I mean, the thing about Howie is he's not to get him over. I disagree with that. I don't know if that's how Marcus phrased it.
Yeah, I have to rewatch it.
He's not getting over the top. He's already at the top. He's trying to stay at the top. You know, and I'm one who said it's very unlikely to happen. But if the stars aligned, he's going to investigate it because this player's better than everybody else, basically. And why wouldn't you want this player? Doesn't mean you trade 3 first-round picks and you give up Nolan Smith and Cooper DeJean. That's the discipline part of it. You don't want to go crazy, but you know, there's going to be one move where people start to question what Howie's going to do. And it's in Andrew Barry. I always bring up the quote in Andrew's office: to win a Super Bowl, you have to do something that could get you fired. Basically saying you have to take chances. You have to be aggressive. You have to seize the moment.
Well, we just won a Super Bowl. What were those moves for Howie leading up to it? Saquon and Jalen Carter?
Well, there's so many, but last year, Saquon was, in hindsight, the boldest move because that went away from conventional thinking, not only from this organization's conventional thinking, but the league as a whole. That shifted people are talking about it today. Oh, the running back market was saved by Saquon Barkley. Well, really was saved by Howie Roseman's decision to sign Saquon Barkley because it went against conventional thinking. Zach Ball, I always say, is the biggest story, but that was just luck. Let's be honest. Not from Zach's standpoint. Worked hard, performed, but that's not what the Eagles thought they were getting. And Howie's admitted that. I didn't think he was going to be a first-team All-Pro. He's admitted that.
Nobody did. Zach Bond didn't.
No.
I saw something.
Well, that's what I mean. That's why I don't compare
on Twitter, like saying he knew Zach Bond.
No,
oh my God, you didn't know shit. Nobody knew this. Zach Bond himself didn't know this.
Yeah, and Howie's on record. Vic's on record. Everybody, Zach's on record. Nobody saw it coming. So that, to me, the player deserves credit, certainly, but I'm not going to give the organization. They weren't projecting to get a first-team All-Pro. With Saquon, Howie called him a weapon. Howie was right. He went against the organization's traditional thinking. He went against the least conventional wisdom. So that would have been that move last year. I can't even argue that would be that move with Garrett because, again, he's more of a sure thing. I know people are going to find that hard to believe, but they're looking at that after seeing the season that Saquon had, not in the lens of last offseason. Miles is, special.
You love Miles.
Eagles love Miles. Jordan loves Miles. Jordan Mailata.
I mean, he's a great
Lane
player.
Johnson
There's no
loves
doubt
Miles.
in that. He is a great
You're not going to see any Twitter rants from Myles Garrett.
No.
He's helpful. He tries to help young offensive. Nothing that says about, barring injury, you always have to talk about injuries in the NFL because it is what it is. Why would anybody think Myles Garrett is going to decline anytime soon? He's in better shape than everybody. He takes care of his body like he's, Derrick Henry level. I mean, why? Why is this player going to fall apart?
Yeah, I don't know. Big Dom checks in again, says the league doesn't want to see Carter next to Miles. You're right about that. The one thing I'll say is, and this is out there, all right? I haven't seen this though anywhere because not everybody might know this, but I saw a picture that came out of the Eagles. It was like Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and a couple other guys that were hanging out with Mark Wahlberg. I don't know if you saw that picture. Did you see that picture of those guys all?
I did not, but Mark was a Patriots fan. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, Mark, I love Mark. I'm a big fan of Mark Wahlberg. He's one of the few guys that I really like in Hollywood. But he has a brand called Municipal. I wear some Municipal. I like the stuff. Very expensive, but it is good stuff. All right. But he has a brand Municipal. They were all hanging out with Mark the other day. And the one athlete in the NFL that Municipal sponsors is Myles Garrett. I'm like, hey, maybe Mark Wahlberg is telling all the Eagles players about Myles Garrett and what he could be with their team. I don't know. Maybe just throwing it out there.
Well, I think they already know. They're already well aware. But yeah, I mean, it's
there though.
It's I just don't get the people. I get the 10-year people, but they're like sports fans. Like that's what you think about baseball. That's what you think about in basketball. You don't think about 10-year plans in football. So, I'm thinking about 2025, 2026, and maybe a little bit of 2027, but that's it. And maybe not even. Can the Eagles win again? Yes. Can they win again? Will they be closer to winning again by adding Myles Garrett? Yes. Can they be the first team to three-peat? Yes. Is it closer to reality if Myles Garrett is here? Yes. I don't get anybody who disputes the football part of it, just making them a better team. Not even close. I don't want to hear about Nolan Smith. I don't want to hear about anybody. Not even flipping close. Not even. Forget about left field. You're not in the stadium. You're not in the same.
So you're going to give up 32, which, by the way, is right around where we selected Nolan Smith. And you're going to give up, let's just say Nolan Smith for the sake of the conversation.
Would I do that? Yes.
I'm just saying that's what you could get that caliber of player at 32, like you got with Nolan Smith. So you're willing to give up basically, let's just for the sake, two Nolan Smiths for Myles Garrett.
Can I give up 3? Can I give up
4? Classic. All right. I don't know, man. I'm a little shaky on this one. I feel I understand the Howdy Namers.
Yeah, I don't think I think the minute, first of all, and let me say this again because I gotta say this over. I don't think the Eagles are getting him. I don't think Cleveland is trading him. I'm saying if I were Howie Roseman and if it were an option, I wouldn't lose an inkling of sleep giving up 32, and I wouldn't. And with Cooper DeJean, who I love as a player. All right, if that's what I got to do, that's what I got to do. I don't care. This is a Hall of Fame player. This is a first ballot Hall of Fame player. This is it's not close. There's nothing you can get at 32 that would ever be Myles Garrett. Ever. Unless you get Lamar Jackson.
Got Cooper DeJean at 40. He was a pretty big impact. Not saying he's Myles Garrett, but big impact.
Yeah, it's great. He had a great impact. So did Nolan. He ain't Myles Garrett.
There's your two guys, 32 and 40, that helped you win a Super Bowl. The fuck we doing? We're taking Howie's process and throwing it into the trash just to get a guy who's 30 years old because he's good. I don't know. It doesn't sound that disciplined to me. I get it. He's this great player.
Howie's process is to get good players. Howie's process is, why do you think he's in everybody's head? Why do you think everybody? Oh, the Eagles are going to get Myles Garrett. What do you think Howie's process is? This is Howie's process.
I know, but remember, we also just talked about how much money they're giving to the offense. They need defensive players on on good rookie contracts. You're going to get rid of 2 of those guys?
First of all, you wouldn't be getting rid of 2 of them. You're assuming that the 32nd pick is going to become
A good player. That's fair.
a good
Can't assume
player.
that.
And then, people are going to run with that. McMullen said they should trade Nolan Smith and Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, true. You get better.
People are going to run with that. So that's not the case. And by the way, I even if the Eagles, and the only reason I focused on Nolan Smith at all is because, well, if Cleveland's losing an edge rusher, in theory, they'd like to have a young edge rusher. I don't even know if they want Nolan Smith. The point is they can probably get more elsewhere. So that makes it unlikely as well. I just, from the standpoint of the player, and again, I say the same thing about Micah Parsons, but even to a greater degree with Myles Garrett. If Eagles fans got to see this player for 2 weeks, all of it would be shut down. All of it, because it's not close. That's all I'm saying. The player, don't compare this player to fledgling guys who showed something over half a season.
Yeah,
don't compare that to 6-time All-Pro Defensive Player of the Year Hall of Fame player. That's all I'm saying.
Sounds great on the surface. Let's hope it would work out if they were to do it. Now, again, John doesn't think they're going to do it anyway, so it's all hearsay at this point. But it is fun conversation to have here on March 6th.
Myles Garrett, 365.
Yeah, baby.
There's
always somebody in the offseason, right? Yeah. That's 3. Remember 1 year it was Bijan.
Well, that's because and by the way, that's because of Howie. And for those who are saying that's not the way Howie, that's everything about Howie. You see what everybody said? Everybody thinks he's getting everybody. Oh, the Eagles and the Eagles. I made that joke for years. When you see all the Bleacher Reports of the world, oh, here are the 5 spots for Myles Garrett and the Eagles. That's because of Howie.
It's also because of our fan base that literally is so rabid. We react to if the Eagles are mentioned by anybody anywhere about anything, we go nuts about it. It's one of the funniest things.
Oh, that's probably true too. That's a big part of it. Yes.
Yeah, people love playing into the Eagles fan base. Can't blame them for that either. They're doing a job and they got to get views and clicks and all sorts of different things. But all right, Johnny Mac, 7 minutes left on the show today, brother. I wanted to get into young guys stepping up this year, but we'll save that for another conversation. Maybe tomorrow or next week as we obviously move along. Free agency begins next week. We had Ian Cummings on earlier in the show. He gave us some really good names in the NFL draft, kind of broke down the position groups that we feel like the Eagles would probably go if they do keep that number 32 overall pick. But another great show, Johnny Mac, and this offseason's cruising, man. It's moving right along. We've had a big week on Birds 365 and the whole network because of what Howie's done this week. You might say it's just business, but boy, the numbers are good on JAKIB because of it. So shout out to Howie. But the offseason's in full swing.
Yeah, man. Human mind's an interesting thing. That's what I said. We're going to get to the more impactful parts of the offseason, not from a player standpoint. These are 2 very impactful players that the Eagles have, in one case, extended, in another case, re-signed. But very impactful players, but I mean from a decision-making standpoint. Milt Williams, Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton, and then to a lesser degree, Isaiah Rodgers. We haven't talked enough about Oren Burks. Signing Zach Bond probably means you're not going to get Oren Burks back. Isaiah Rodgers, Kenny Gainwell, even.
Yeah.
What's Kenny Gainwell's market? And if he doesn't have a market, do you want to bring him back as the backup?
I'm not tripping over Kenny Gainwell.
No, but these are decisions. I mean, there's like, for a lot of people, like, they just did what they did for Saquon. All right. Nobody's coming here to be
running back too. Yeah.
So it might be your best option, and not to mention that Jalen Hurts loves Kenny Gainwell. Nick Sirianni loves Kenny Gainwell.
Is the obvious answer to the question there, where they might just elevate Will Shipley? They spent what, a 4th-round pick?
Yeah,
on him?
I mean, I think if Kenny
like
leaves,
6 or 7, yeah.
I think if Kenny leaves, that's the most logical option. Because again, you're not looking to get, like a lot of teams are looking for that two-headed monster. The Eagles are not.
No, they're not.
And nor would, and everyone realizes that. So you're not going to get a lot of touches here if everything goes to plan. The only way you're getting touches in Philadelphia is if Saquon gets hurt, which obviously you're not going to build your team that way.
Right.
Assuming that. So maybe the best path forward is to get Kenny back. But if he gets 2 years somewhere, you probably can't get him back. So there's some of those plan B sort of free agents, as I call them, that are pretty significant decisions because, they helped you win too, those guys. Warren Burks really helped you win. I mean, he was phenomenal in the playoffs after N'Kobe got hurt. And Kenny helped you win, even though people seem not to like him. So those are important guys too.
Yep, no doubt about it. Good stuff, Johnny Mac. John, I was thinking, I'm starting to see all the Philly stuff that happens in the, they got to be. It must suck to be another sports team in Philly with Howie Roseman. I mean, they just won the fucking Super Bowl. The Phillies are trying to get their say in spring training, and still the Eagles dominate the headlines all over the city of brotherly love.
The Sixers and Flyers can't complain because they just suck, but they've sucked for years. But the Phillies have been good. But yeah, I mean, it's a football town, and the football team's good.
It used to be a baseball town, John.
Oh yeah, I mean, everything used to be a baseball town when I was young. Baseball was more popular. People find that hard. Young people find that very hard to believe. Baseball for many, many years was more popular than football.
Yeah, I hope baseball makes it. I think they're okay. I just hope they make a big comeback. I mean, I love baseball, but I get it.
So do I. But well, I don't love the modern game. It's the same thing. Everything.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, when I'm done with this job, whenever it is, some people would like that to be tomorrow.
I would not.
I'm not watching much sports because and this is all across the board. I've said this pretty consistently. The products are they're watered down, and it's not the athletes. The athletes are better, but because of the influx of nerds, as I like to call them, in math, it's all 3-point shots in basketball. It's all launch angle. Station to station baseball is dead.
I got to start watching basketball again. I miss watching basketball, but boy, it's hard.
It's tough to watch, man. Tough to watch,
especially in Philly, man. It's a tough watch.
Because basketball was my favorite sport when I was growing up. For people that don't know, and I was a big Sixers fan, and I was a big Julius Erving fan, and I always point to that my disdain of the modern game. The most exciting moments for anybody who was around there was Mo Cheeks leading the fast break. Julius Erving screaming down one wing, Bobby Jones screaming down the other wing, all Hall of Fame players, and Mo would dish it off for a thunderous dunk wherever it was. Now, you know what happens? Everybody veers to the 3-point line.
Right. They stop and pull up.
Yeah. And you took away the most exciting aspect. It's just, I wish more people would. But now you've gone too far down that road, and now people have grown up with this product, and they love the product because they haven't seen anything else. Same thing with football. Football, it's more safety related, though. Unfortunately, the safety dogma, the concussion issue, the legal indemnity has changed the game so drastically. It's not nearly as entertaining. And then you get people on their high horse. Well, you got to protect the people. And they don't give a shit. They don't care about torn ACLs. They don't care about spine surgery. They just want to look good on social media and say, I care about concussions.
Jeff Bones says, John, are you going to watch March Madness?
No.
No? I do like March Madness. I'll definitely watch.
I'll watch. I'll
a little bit. Yeah, you're not going to be locked in on everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I didn't even get to college. I mean, college.
What's on the off-season watch card?
WrestleMania season. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, but that's only one night. I mean, or one weekend.
Are you kidding me? It's Monday night, Friday. They're on too much, man. I can't keep up.
Oh, I
They're on Monday night, Tuesday night.
Okay, so now, see, this is what I'm learning about. It's all the build up to this moment. It's not you can't just watch WrestleMania. When is WrestleMania?
April, yeah, mid-April, April 16th, maybe 17th.
Right. This
two
might
nights.
Be the time. I
two
guess
nights.
some of you guys can get me to watch some wrestling. I might peek in and watch a little wrestling and see what it does for me. See if I like it or not. But all right, Johnny Mac, great show today, brother. Another edition of Birds 365 in the books. Thanks everybody for being here. Don't forget to hit that like button on the show. We got to get better at the likes in the off season. Come on, everybody. Johnny Mac, great show, brother. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Zach Bond coming back, John.
Yeah, we'll see. We might be talking to you later today because Howie's working this week. As
Mekhi Becton season. Mekhi Becton. See next.
I think Mekhi is going to test the markets, but we'll see. We'll see.
One reason I thought Mekhi might not is because I just felt like I felt it in his voice. I felt like he really loved.
I think he wants.
Yeah.
I think he wants to be here. I think he wants to be here, but that's a tough one for the Eagles too, because they're not setting the market with Mekhi Becton.
No,
like
they're not.
Set the market with Saquon Barkley, and Zach Bond didn't set the market, but he's top 5. They're not doing that with Mekhi. So it's a little bit more difficult from that standpoint. But he wants to be here. There's no question about that.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. Johnny Mac, great show today, brother. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Football Friday at Birds 365. Thanks for doing it today, brother.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, there's Johnny Mac joining the show. Birds 365. Great episode today. Love draft talk. Love Ian Cummings. I thought he was amazing today. And I love, obviously, Zach Bond under contract. Woo! I love it. I feel better about that than McMullen does. Sorry, John. I know you're saying this is just business. He doesn't deserve credit for this. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. I'm pumped about Zach Bond returning because I think you're starting to see what this 2025, 2026 defense is going to look like. Before Bond was signed, you wondered, oh, holy shit, we got a lot of change on that number 1 overall defense. But now I feel a little bit better about the moving parts that you have there. So we will see how it all shakes out. But I thought Ian Cummings today was excellent. I mean, that dude, he was on a hiatus. Pro Football Network brought him back recently to cover the draft again. I'm thinking about bringing him in. I want to do something with him on JAKIB. Wouldn't that be cool to launch? It wouldn't be on Birds 365 or anything, but a separate show, maybe even not even a live show, just videos daily of draft prospects leading up to the NFL draft. I think that'd be great. So I'm set to speak with Ian Cummings about that potentially for JAKIB. I just think the guy is so well-rounded the way he talks about prospects. It's incredible. So maybe that's something that we'll have coming to JAKIB Sports, and we'll see about that. But I thought it was a great show today, man. And Bond back, Ian Cummings breaking down some draft prospects. Excellent work there. The C.J. Gardner-Johnson stuff, I mean, come on. Come on with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I don't know. I get it. Some people are like, oh, C.J.'s talking truth, and other people are like, shut the hell up. But I get it. I get it all. Interesting stuff there. Zander, can you link Ian's channel? He doesn't have a channel. I think he works for Pro Football Network. He does draft coverage there. So ideally, I'd like to make our channel a home for him to publish draft content. I think he'd be excellent just recorded, content on a particular prospect or a position group or top 10 prospects Eagles can draft at 32 and all sorts of different things. So a lot of options in the pipeline. We'll see how it all shakes out. All right. We'll see how it all shakes out. Denny Mertz says JAKIB needs to hire future Hall of Famer Philly 500. I'd love to hire Philly 500. I don't think he needs us, Denny. I think he's got his own channel. He does great work there. I don't know. Is he open to hire? I don't know if he would be or not. I'll have that conversation though. I have a good connection with Philly 500. We talk sometimes off the air, and he's a great dude. He does a really good job. So, I like this. This is a great idea. By the way, Zander time might shift. I want to move it off Birds 365, I think. As much as I love doing it right after the show, this is like Aaron and John's Twitter right now. You know what I mean? There's a couple other, it delays when I can post the podcast, all sorts of different stuff. So I might move it off and just start going Zander Krause show. Hopefully you guys will join me there. If not, that's all right. We'll build that up slowly if needed. Looking forward to doing all that. Kirsten says, Ian's coverage and view was nice. I enjoyed that segment. Yeah, he's really good, Kirsten. I'm telling you, you heard John say it. you won't even hear guys at the national level break down prospects like he does. I mean, he just makes it understandable as well. So very good stuff from Ian Cummings. I'm a big fan of his. For sure. So well done today. I didn't have a chance to talk to the chat about, obviously we've done a lot of content since I was on Cilio's show. We did an emergency football 24/7 reaction to Zack Baun signing yesterday, but I didn't have a chance to talk to my Birds 365 chat crew. How you guys feeling after Zack Baun gets done? I know obviously most of us wanted Zack Baun back, but now that it's done, for me, my take was, boy, I felt a sigh of relief. I'm like, all right, Baun's coming back. Now I feel better because I'm like, you got Baun, you got Carter, you got Nolan, you got the safeties, you got Cooper and Quinion. Like, this defense is taking shape, right? This defense is taking shape. So, Eduardo, I'm with you. He says a sigh of fucking relief, my boy. Eduardo, you can say that again, Eduardo. I'm with you, my friend. I'm with you all the way, Eduardo. I appreciate you being here, brother. Eagle Nest. Man, I'm feeling like we got the best owner and GM in the NFL right now. Yeah, owner for sure. I have said on the show before that, sometimes the owner doesn't rub me the right way. I'm willing to say that my opinion on the owner doesn't mean squiggly tits. All right. It doesn't matter at all. All right. He is doing a really good job with this football team. He has made them one of the best organizations in football. I mean, this is just the facts, right? This is just the facts. So he's done a really good job. The way he's willing to shell out money, a lot of these owners got the money, but it's a different story when you're saying, I got to put $50 million in escrow. I got to put $60 million in escrow. I got to put $100 million in escrow. So that's where the men are separated from the boys, I'll say. And Jeffrey Lurie's done a really good job, man. It's really impressive what he's done. So I agree with that, Eagle Nest, no doubt about it. Josh B checking in. What's up, Josh B? I know I still owe you a jersey. Don't worry. I didn't forget about you. I didn't forget about you. I didn't forget about anybody. I never forget about the people. All right. The only thing I'm worried about now is Burnt Berry affected the one-year wonder. Obviously, the right move. Just need Baun to keep it going. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so, man. I don't think so. I really don't. Look, it's certainly possible, Josh, but my honest opinion is I don't think there's a chance in hell that happens with Zack Baun. I really don't. I just think Vic Fangio and the way he has his defense and the role that he has Baun in is such a perfect fit. Like, unless Zack Baun is just athletically not the same guy he was last year, I don't see it. I don't see it going that route. I really don't. But I hear you. It's certainly a concern. He's only played it 1 year. I thought Marcus Hayes had another good point about this. He's like, well, if he only did it 1 year and he was asked to do it 5 years, that's a big problem. But he was only asked to do it 1 year. Think about it. He was never asked to be an off-ball linebacker ever in his career. So the first year they asked him to be that, he was exceptional. So if you think about it, he's really shooting 100% from the field. Again, if he was asked to be an off-ball linebacker in New Orleans, you'd be like, oh, it's a 1 year guy. He wasn't asked. So the first year he was asked to be this guy, he became that, and he was really good. So technically he's 1 for 1 in my opinion. Dakota Warren, if your owner likes rings, then the money don't matter. That's a good point, Dakota. It's a good point, Dakota. Good take, brother. Appreciate you being here, Dakota. One of my boys. I saw you laying that concrete the other day, Dakota. That's a fun job. Dakota, in an alternate world where I didn't sit in front of my fucking computer all day, I think I would like what you do. Fuck, get out in the sun, get outside, and lay concrete down all day. All right? Lay concrete. I think I'd have a lot of fun with that. It's a man's job right there. I like that. Good stuff, Dakota. Appreciate you being here, brother. Appreciate you being here. I pray our main guys stay healthy again next year. That's my only fear. Well, Kirsten, the problem with that is, that's a fear with everybody, man. That's a fear with everybody. Every team in the NFL, every player in the NFL. Anybody can get, hurt tomorrow. That's how it works. So it's a fear. I get it. But if you're scared, get a dog, Kirsten. All right. It's real work, Jose. No doubt about it, brother. I respect people that do that. But Jason A-Team, when I was younger, man, I loved physical jobs. My favorite job of my youth, Jason A-Team, is when I was 16 years old and I was a bar back. I loved being a bar. I like being a bar back way more than I like being a bartender. Running, getting the kegs, throwing the cases up on your shoulders, restocking the fridges. I mean, I was a bar back at the Windrift in Avalon. So I stayed at our place in Cape May in the summer, and I was a bar back at Windrift in Avalon. So I did that for a couple of summers. That was fun, man. Now, that's not the same real work. I get it. It's not the same as laying concrete, but I'm just saying I did love the physical labor stuff, man. I thought that was dope to do, fun to do. Good stuff. All right, everybody. I appreciate all you guys being here. We had a great show today. Again, Brickhouse Tavern in Willow Grove. I know right where you're at, brother. Jason, you know you're not far from me, so I know where you're at. Good stuff there. Appreciate everybody for checking in today. Don't forget to hit that like button. What's the next move, everybody? What in your opinion is the most pressing next move for the Eagles? Like I said yesterday was March 5th. I'm like, boy, you got to feel pretty good as an Eagle fan, as a player, as a front office guy at where your team is on March 5th. I know there's a lot of offseason to go. I know it's not done. I get that. I'm not saying it is, but when you look at this team, like the whole offense is returning. Barback is hard labor. I didn't say that, Sig Lord. I didn't say that. I just said that was my version of doing physical labor. And yes, when you carry a keg up 3 flights of stairs in the Windrift, that could be hard labor. But I got you, Sig Lord. Your whole offense is returning. Most of your defense is under contract. Obviously, you're going to lose some dudes. But, you feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about, where you're at. Blue Virus, what's going on, motherfucker? Blue, who you guys taking in the draft? I keep asking you this, and it changes, but I'm seeing Ashton Genty. I don't like that for you guys. Like, Blue, are you guys going to be able to compete with the Eagles this year? Are you going to be able to compete, Blue? Blue is a Cowboys fan, for those who don't know. Blue, are you guys going to compete? Let me know, Blue, because I really don't think you are. And if you do, maybe this year, then it doesn't look pretty for you guys. And Blue, I'm trying to say that without being like an Eagle homer. I can try and view it objectively. Like, okay, what are the best teams in the NFL? Detroit's really good. Washington's obviously coming up strong. A couple other great teams in the NFL. The Chiefs are really good. The Bills are good. Ravens are going to be good again. There's a lot of great teams, but I don't know. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to compete. You'll have Dak back, so it's different. It's different. Good question, Dakota. Who's blocking for Genty? I agree. He says, hey, man, as a Cowboys fan, I hope we will. Yeah, no, look, I just don't. Blue, I think Jerry Jones' glory days are just way behind him, man. I mean, it almost feels like Howie Roseman is the 2025 version of 1992 Jerry Jones. I don't know if that's fair to say because I know that was pre-salary cap, but good Lord, this Eagles team is built and with a good future ahead of them with youth. And I feel like your Cowboys team is just the opposite. And here's what I'll say. Obviously, I'm not a Cowboys fan. I think that there's a better camaraderie in the NFL when the Cowboys are good, or at least competing. Even when you guys won 12 games and we all joked that you were going to get bounced in the playoffs. I want the Cowboys to be good. It makes the NFC East more fun. It makes our spats more fun. It makes when you come on my show and I tell you to fuck off, it makes it more fun. But I don't see it right now. And William says, Cowboys might compete in a baseball game. Yeah, we'll see. We will see. Jerry Jones is F. They're drafting Omarion Hampton, running back North Carolina. I actually like Omarion Hampton, but I don't like him that much. 12th overall pick. Come on. All right, everybody. I appreciate all your great support today. Ooh, one thing I wanted to check. Actually, this is for business off the air, so I can check it when I'm done. All right, everybody. I appreciate you all doing it, checking in today. Don't forget to hit that like button. I appreciate everybody, by the way, for all the support here in the off season. For those who are members of JAKIB Nation, I didn't forget about you. All right. I'm just kind of recouping here after the season wrapped up. We're going to do a ton of stuff. So that giveaway for Lambeau might be tough to do, but what I am going to do is once we make that first round pick, we're going to do a bunch of giveaways on that jersey. We'll do a bunch of stuff. So I didn't forget about my members. Don't worry. I never will. Your support of the channel does not go unnoticed. We've had some people drop off postseason. We knew that would happen. I was kind of waiting for that, honestly, because giveaway to people who are going to drop off inevitably or, wait a little bit and give giveaways to the people who are going to stick around with Jacob through thick and thin. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate all the support. I thought we had a really good show today. And again, appreciate all you guys. Hit that like button on your way out. And I'll see you next time on Birds 365. Love all you guys.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.